Well, hello everyone. We are back for another episode of Tattoos and Toddlers, the podcast. And as I've told y'all before, I'll break my own rules anytime I want to because it's my podcast. And so I have a yet another amazing guest on here that may not have any toddlers, probably has a tattoo, but doggone it, we love Alex. So welcome, Alex, to the show. Alex, introduce yourself.
Yeah, for all the viewers and listeners, I'm Alex Bellocq. I am a dancer, photographer, videographer, is how I've been branding myself lately. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and I dance with the Lexington Ballet Company. When I'm in season, when I'm out of season, I'm usually busy making dance films or working on projects with my photography and videography or choreographing for myself and studios around this area. So that's me in a nutshell. And I do have one
Yeah.
tattoo on my arm.
Yeah, I was gonna say more than a nutshell, y'all. Let's just say I think Alex dances circles around some of us as far as creativity and teaching and dance.
Oh,
And if you sit down for 5 minutes with Alex, he's got so much to share with you if you are so inclined to listen. That's what I love
you're
about
so
our
sweet.
talks. Yes, our talks, even on the streets of McKinney, Texas, we were keeping it weird. It was so much
Keep McKinney
fun.
weird.
Yes. So what I've been talking about recently is that I have anybody on my podcast. But what you mentioned earlier in our pre-talk is that you teach a lot of kids, and I think that's important to note that when you're a teacher and you're pouring into this next generation and then you're consistently pouring into yourself with your knowledge and education and then passing on to the next person, then also doing it in your work and your art. Let's just talk about overworking or burnout because I feel like as all y'all see the expression if you're watching the YouTube, I feel that that comes with a price tag, right? You're a giving person, you're a very fluid person, giving and flowing consistently. It feels like whether it's in dance, photo, video. How does your life start to look like burnout? And what do you do when you see that you are starting to get burned out?
That's a very good question, and the answer changes each time the cycle hits.
Right? And
Um,
cycle is the key word. It's a cycle.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like you said. So you and I met at the Promoting Passion convention where I was first introduced to that community by an old friend of mine, Matty, who's a wonderful photographer, and he actually got me into like the nuts and bolts behind photo work because
Yeah.
I always find like as a dancer, you have a lot of people interested for you modeling for them, and I always
Yep.
love that. But I loved more than that the math and the science and the rules of composition and what all that goes into pressing the shutter button. So, but more than that, it's another avenue to express creativity, and that's what I really love about the PPC community. Is that what we call it for short?
Yeah.
And what I love about you and what I love about all the people is just this commitment to creative freedom and bravery. And if something might not work, you're still going to try it out anyways. We did this weird photo shoot with this bendy piece of plastic that
Oh my God.
distorted my
Yeah.
features. And you saw me as I was coming out of another photo shoot that was
Yep.
a little bit
Yep.
more editorial, character driven, like red lipstick and like a red bandana, a little bit piratey, a little bit Bertolt Brecht theater piratey. What's that German band that you love so much that has
Oh,
Die Hast du
Rammstein.
nicht? Rammstein, exactly, a little bit Rammstein, and so perfect example right there. Just all these reference points are just off the beaten path, as it were. And I teach kids, and what I find is all of my interests are kind of existing right here as I think about it, like where
Mhm.
when I have the free time and I have the lineup of the energy and the free time and the drive and the collaborators usually to get these ideas like into creation. And then there's over here, which is my choice to make my living off my art rather than having a
Mm.
regular 9 to 5 clock in and out job and work on the weekends. And that is ironically something that I'm struggling with because all of my creative energy is diverted from this over here to this over here with the kids. And teaching is an incredibly creative act,
Yeah.
as well as how to organize the class, how to organize
Mhm.
all the possibility of dance technique into what is achievable what is doable, and of course to the needs of the kids that are in front of you. You don't always I don't have a class full of prodigies in front of me, and but that doesn't really matter. It's about my job is to be creative in how to communicate to each individual kid, both as an individual and as a cohort. And as you can probably tell, I respect the art teaching so much. I just find that I don't know if I'm the best at it. I have a high respect for it, and I feel like I'm going uphill much more often than not. And I'm kind of weighing up rebalancing my life a little bit more. Maybe I go more into working for pay for things that don't take all my creative energy, so I can then channel myself into what I want to make. And all these kind of things like that is kind of what we're talking about. So how that circles to burnout is I do perceive that I have a gas tank of creative energy. And when I'm applying it to teaching or to dancing for other people's projects
Yeah.
or to these other things that are making me money and that are allowing me to be collaborative and creative and work on a bigger scale than I have with my lack of investors and lack of overhead. All of a sudden, when I go to turn the engine on for my own projects, it's sputtering and it's out of gas. And
Yeah.
that's a frustration that I have, is how I think the burnout manifests for me.
No, and I think that's a very real thing. Like if anybody listening can relate to this, you do only have so much time during the day. You do have only so much energy that if you spend 1 hour a week working on your creative projects, and if that's what you have to do to get through the week to satisfy your soul, it's sad to say that may be it for you that week, right? It's like and I think about all the times I've denied myself because I've been too tired, right? And
Hmm.
it's not even that you're physically tired, it's just you're mentally tired. And you could have like an encyclopedia of ideas, but then you're like, well, what? And then you're like, what's the point? You know?
Yeah. You don't want to half bake it, right? Like you have this idea you want to
Yeah.
execute, and maybe you could execute it, but it wouldn't be to the standards you might want it to be, or have like the full force of you behind it. Is how I'm thinking about it, like as my mother likes to say, like don't half do a job, but like that's sometimes, like you said, the only option you have, and it's either hold off and hope that maybe you get more into later on, or let this idea maybe go a bit, and then I don't know. It's a hard balance to hit. And I
It
feel like maybe you
really,
can relate
yeah.
because you do wedding photography, and I feel like you find creativity within that, but that's probably more technical sided, right?
It's
Like, so for
technical, but
me,
it's also for my client. It's not for me, believe
mm,
it or not. Like I spend more time thinking about them and the product
mhm,
than I do my own personal gain from it. Like I think there's maybe one time of the day where I can say I get to go make this photo, and it's usually
mhm,
the wedding rings. Let's just be honest. I like
right.
making little art with the wedding rings or whatever, right? But when it comes to, having this self-creative moment, I maybe get one image from the whole day. And I think I was taught that a long time ago when I approach a job like that. Like get an image that you could be out of your own box with, even if it's for a client.
Hmm.
And that gets really difficult for me when I go between the wedding work and the portrait work. And I really want to do something
Mm.
creative in the portraits, but my client only wants the white backdrop in a studio. And I'm like, oh, I'm just like not feeling the creative satisfaction here for a second.
Way back from a studio or the outdoors engagement shoot with the leaves being thrown in the air.
Yeah, there's a point where, and that's why I think I've been learning to love the separation of the creation for myself and the creation for my client,
Hmm.
because that means you're literally shutting down everybody else's voices and listening to your own, which I think is so important when we create work for ourselves, which usually ends up being for the rest of the world, whether we like it or not. Like we want to share our
Yeah.
work with people.
Yeah,
But
right.
when you dig deep into who you are and what you're trying to say, I think that is one of the most fulfilling things that I ever do. Even if it's
Hmm.
just a stupid idea that takes me 5 minutes. Like I was saying, like sometimes you only have an hour. What if
Yeah.
you only had 5 minutes in your day and you're like, what could I create in 5 minutes? It's burning a hole in my head right now. I have to go create the thing. And I have done this. I don't know if you have this in your workflow, Alex, but if you have
Hmm.
an idea and then you're in the middle of something and that idea needs to be captured, otherwise it's not going to work, I always email myself. I don't
Oh,
know if
I
you
love
do the
that.
same thing.
Well, I'm a little more old school, actually. Let me go ahead and
Sticky
pull something
notes,
up.
right?
Uh, so I actually have about this is a funny this is my toxic trait as it were, and for the people that are watching or that was listening, this is one of my four journals that I have in rotation, and they're all for
Wow.
very specific things because I
Whoa.
think that for my mind, I have to kind of keep it in like these different flows in my email. My avoidant tendencies trigger and I all of a sudden let emails pile up. That's why I gracefully just emailed you last night being like, oh, I was waiting until it was closer to the deadline. No, I just was like, oh, I'm listening with Jen. I gotta get my headshot to her. So for example, this gold and black journal that I'm holding up right now, this is a bunch of is what I call my uncollected work journal, and I try to
Ooh.
not really mine it for further development. But like you said before, I broke my own rule last night, and so I have a
Uh-huh.
list right here of topics, and I was inspired actually by Brooke Shaden, our queen. This last convention we went to, where she had an exercise. We wrote down controversial topics that are the forefront of our minds and just like go
Mm,
into like a bit of an automatic writing place and write them down,
yeah.
and then to winnow it down to things that other people might have a reaction to you saying, and then to allow yourself to potentially begin to make work on that topic to create that was driven to, I believe, make meaningful work, make work that is controversial, which means that it's touching people for better or for worse. And that's, I think, what the goal of it is, right? You don't want to make things that are just, I mean, I don't know what you're, I can go ahead and hazard a guess that you, Jen, you don't personally want to make work that's going to go into a wall and just never like really be commented on or looked at. You want to make something that will grab the viewer and like make them have a second look, maybe like a double take. And so for me, I do make those idea journals and I have them
Yeah.
all. It's a very specific system that I swear makes sense. It's somewhere in my
It
mind.
makes sense to, that's the great thing about our creative processes is that everybody listening understand that your method is your method, and please use what works for you, because if I was sold on every workflow, every method, every little thing that they're trying to sell me out there, I would never get anything done, because it would just be collections and collections of just like you said, like how many journals have I bought for every convention I've ever done? Where are they now?
I'm the opposite. I have so many, and I always bounce between them all, and so I'm like paging through. But I'm so like my idealized creative place is there's a deep cut reference. You remember that animated show Avatar: The Last Airbender?
I don't think I ever
Remember that
watched the
show?
animated version, but yeah.
It's really lovely, and there's this great part with like this whole long metaphor of like this god in the desert, like an owl god of knowledge, and it's like a whole like library of Alexandria, gigantic, and at the very end like he sinks it below the desert so no one else can have the information, and they're all like trying to dig through the sand to like get some more information out, and that's like me with
Wow.
my journal pile at home, just like, where did I put that one thing from 4 years ago?
Oh my gosh,
um
isn't that funny? Oh, yeah.
I wanted
Yeah.
to circle back actually, and you were talking about just getting the
Yes.
idea out, and I've been trying to do that more myself lately, just kind
Yeah.
of as like a creative antidote. And so, like for example, last night I I got a videography job for a local circus school in Lexington that I work for, and I train at. I'm going to be performing with them as the Mad Hatter for Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
I also choreograph, but for this instance, there is an adult student showcase and a youth student showcase, and they just need a videographer. Someone pulled out, and I was like, oh, well, I've got two interchangeable lens cameras that shoot at 1080p and blah, 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 all the technical jargon. I said, I can make that happen. And so we got contracts, took a deal, and I went and videographed them, and then came the editing. And as you know, with anything with visual and digital, the
Yes.
editing is always the part to like dive into and really give yourself a few hours to work out to really make it worthwhile. And after I finished all that, I finished both of them last night. I'm so relieved I'm turning them in tomorrow. And
Mhm.
I was like, while I have my video editor open and my computer's on its last gasps of breath before I plug it in, I pulled out an old video I made in the pandemic of just me dancing. Actually, no, this was an audition video I made 2 years ago. And
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? I want to try something new, get a new skill going, and maybe make something I can put on my social media. And I did it's a tracking based thing. So like you put your head in the middle and like it moves the whole frame around you. It's an effect that you've seen a lot on TikTok and Instagram.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've never done it before. And I was like, how do I do it? And it was turns out very difficultly. But I had fun. and it took me an extra 45 minutes. I did not go to sleep, and I cranked it out, and I processed it, and I put it up, and it's honestly one of the more favorite things I've made lately out of basically like found digital art artifacts and of like the last second like afterthought. And I'm like, I actually like this a lot. I would love to make something larger like this, and I have a new skill. And so I guess I'm eating my words from earlier. I do enjoy doing the half baked job a little bit if I
Yeah.
can target it to something like that, because that really made my night last night. One for them, one for me, you know?
Well, it's true though, especially if it's right there in front of you and you're like, what if? What if blah? And then you follow the path to wherever it's leading. And I think that's wonderful because that to me seems very organic and less planned. Which in my most of my art, it's very much not planned. And if I do
Yeah.
have it planned, it's because I've been sitting on an idea in my inbox or on a piece of paper that I needed to go do. And then I have to plan the day to go do it. But
Right.
a lot of times, if it hits me, I want to follow it through right then. I'm very impatient. I don't want to sit around and wait on it. I don't want to wait for it to be perfect. I like going. I actually did a talk recently because, as you know, I'm going into,
Yeah.
um, speaking. I did a
Yeah.
talk recently on imperfection training
Mm.
because how many of us we're more trained ourselves to be perfect versus just be imperfect and be okay with it. So
Yep.
I was kind of like, how do we show up in our art? How do we show up online? How do we show up to our job? How do we show up to our people? How do we show up knowing that we are going to be imperfect? And the last PPC was a perfect example of
Yeah.
imperfection for me because I was
Absolutely.
sobbing by the next day after I got on
Yep.
stage to talk about stuff and I was going to do it differently. And boy, did I. I have never been so raw in front of a huge crowd of people in my life, especially when I
Yeah.
got up the next morning and I was just crying because I felt awful about not being 100%. I
Yeah.
felt awful that I couldn't show up at my best because I'm like, I
Yeah.
tell people if I don't get sleep, I'm not a human. I'm just telling you straight up.
I'm right there with you.
I was like, you can be the kindest person, but if some people is hangry or they got lack of sleep, I mean, that's just a straight up human necessity, food, water, sleep. I mean, come on.
And that unnamed resort in Georgia, because I don't want to get blasted with the food that was less than stellar and like the lies
Oh,
about veganism for our vegan members.
oh, our
I
poor
was right
vegans.
the whole trip.
Our poor vegans. But oh my gosh, yeah, that was something else to like, consistently learn something about yourself when you are
Mhm.
creating and whatever you are doing in this moment. If you are pushing yourself even ever so slightly in another dimension, get ready to eat your own words again. Like you said earlier, get ready to eat your own words of what you had
Yeah.
just said because you're going to get challenged right away with either the idea or what you said or what you think you know about yourself.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I love this part though, because it's just like, well, I've got to be real about being imperfect, but how do I show up imperfect and be okay with that? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
how do I do
Yeah.
that?
No, I actually, it's funny you mentioned that too. That's like really getting my mind going. I think that's also with like the whole burnout cycle. I've been thinking a lot about it lately. And recently, this last Friday, actually, I was really stressed out, and I actually went to my synagogue. I'm Jewish, and
Mhm.
I gave a speech before the congregation that was trying to make sense of like that this week's Torah portion, which is about a specific ancient kind of animal sacrifice. And I was like, I started off by being like, talk about something completely different. And in my speech, I really wanted to deliberately like be like, I don't know how to find my way into this. I'm gonna kind of like riff on it a little bit. And the response I got from the community that I was there, who I haven't seen and I haven't been to my synagogue in like 2 years, because I've been so busy, is they were really moved by it and touched by it. And they said it was really like almost like it was technically sound in the way that I structured it, which I took very much pride in, of course, because I really do love writing and I really do love public speaking and I really want to like develop the skills much more and more. But they said it's just like admitting that I don't have all the answers while presenting it in a very cogent and cohesive and very eloquent-ish way. Their words, not mine. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, oh
um,
yeah.
but it's that tension between being um I'll say perfect in that sense, perfect and vulnerable, I feel like. And I feel like the best things straddle the two of them. Because if you're vulnerable without technique behind it can turn a bit into a blubbering mess, and it's a little bit like, okay, dear, let's get you some sleep and some food, which even though you might be saying it's really
Yeah.
meaningful, someone can share that in front of people, but then
Yeah.
turns very quickly off the rails, and it's not really communicative. But if it's
Yeah.
just communicative and just really technically sound at how they use alliteration and how they use emotional appeals and how they use rhetorical devices, then it's great and it transmits information, but what are you transmitting? And I feel like that's the point right there. You got to transmit something real, and it's this juggling thing. It's the tensions there in dance and performing arts as well too, as well as I would say like visual arts, like photography and painting. You can
Yeah.
be the strongest technician in the world, but what's the subject you're capturing?
If you
And
have not love, what are you communicating? And
absolutely.
I think that's the running thread I found with all of our connections in humanity, and whatever
Mhm.
service we are providing, whatever creativity we are getting out there, if there is not love behind it, you cannot receive it. That's for sure.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I mean, no, you can't see it, you can't receive it. All your senses are just not working. And I feel that
Yeah.
what you just shared, because I was like, I was imagining, say, extreme Vulcan versus, blubbering mess, right? Like, or
There it is, Star
extreme
Trek. Yeah.
robot.
Full Vulcan versus full human, disgusting,
Yeah,
willowing
yeah,
human.
and it's got to be full emotional human, because
Yeah.
I've met some amazing humans that are almost Vulcan, and
They're Vulcans, don't
yeah, they're
worry.
totally Vulcans. They just don't have all the, they're totally off-worlders.
Yeah,
But no,
yeah.
it's great, because I think that's so, I love that you shared that, because those of us who are using podcasts or using audio to speak about these kinds of things, some people need to learn audibly. You need to learn a
Hmm.
certain way. And I love that
Yeah.
all these creative art forms, we can learn visually and audibly, and then we can also figure out how to communicate through all that.
Hmm.
And I love it. And I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that goes right back to teaching. Some kids learn visually, some audibly, some kinesthetically, where you have them moving within their own body and their own system, and it really helps them pick it up. And and I have a great empathy because I was fortunate that in school, the methodology that the public school system of Kentucky, which is much like everywhere else, I assume in America at least, of sitting and learning and repeating and, for lack of better terms, teaching to the test, did work for me because I just had a great hunger for knowledge, and that method of communication really worked for me. But my life got better when I began to be able to have movement become part of my day and just like physical exercise. And I also just really disliked academia at that point in my life because I felt like it is the best way to organize and to develop more knowledge. But I also feel like it can lead to people sitting on knowledge like a dragon on treasure and not really sharing it. I'm like, well, then why do you have the knowledge? Like, if you aren't sharing it or transmitting it to other people to make new connections and things like that. That's a little bit my own personal touch up against academia, but that's also what I bring to my teaching, is I really do, um, despite the vicissitudes of day-to-day life of like this kid having a power struggle with you, this 8-year-old kid having a power struggle with you over like your control of your class, and you're like, do you need to sit out? You need to sit out now. You know, in and among the most like base level of that, I also have like in like the my heart of hearts in the back of my mind being like, okay, so what is this kid not getting from me right now? And then like I start from there, but then I have to use the soft skills to be like, no, you don't get to do that right now. Sit out. Sit out now. Just like having to go, it's a very funny like duality, because I'm like I sometimes take it so heavy, like the weight of like these kids' education, like hopefully their love of dancing, and I really want to take that seriously. I take that seriously, but also you gotta also like deal with like this bratty 8-year-old in front of you who does not want to be doing this, and it's measured in a series of years, and I may not ever see the results for myself, like as like a thank you or whatever. And there's a very potent and I think bittersweet kind of piece to make with that, where it's like, yeah, like you may never thank me, but I hope that wherever you are in 10 years, you can at least look back on something that I gave you, whether it was a dance step or an analogy of your body, or even, excuse me, the disciplining or boundary setting to teach you how to be more disciplined, that you can look back and be like, oh, I do appreciate that. And I try to do the same thing for my former teachers, some of whom I've kept contact with and who I've lost contact with for better and for worse. I am grateful for all those people. So I have to hope that the kids that I'm teaching now will have that same feeling. You'll never know.
I love this conversation so much. If y'all have not been enjoying Alex, I don't know why you're here today on this episode. I enjoy Alex's voice. I love the brain, the heart, everything about you. And I'm so excited to go into our next phase of the conversation. I kind of want to know a little bit about your tattoo. You said you have a tattoo, don't know anything about it. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, I'll show. So I'm
I
showing
want
on
to.
the Zoom right now. For the people that cannot see, I'll give a audio description of it as well. So it's on
Sure.
my left forearm, right below the elbow, right where my elbow creases. And it's a modification of the Aquarius symbol.
Hmm.
And I drew it myself. It has four other symbols in there. It has a little like wave end right here,
Yeah.
a little bit of a wind breeze right here. And then it has these two Nordic runes. This one is the symbol of air, which is a triangle with a longer bottom edge. Also, it's a little bit A for Alex, A for anarchy, a little bit like that too, which I don't hate.
That's
And
cute.
then this one is about another Nordic rune that is, it's actually three triangles above the top of each other, and it's
Gotcha.
about like high, middle, low, like sky, earth, ground, I guess. It's about having a home and about having a home that reaches upwards and downwards. I think it's based on like the world tree myth from Nordic mythology. And so I love symbology. I really do love things that are grand in scale but like simple in execution. And so I illustrated that myself. And I had my now ex clean it up, who's a visual artist, because he did a much better job at the rendition than I did. And this part of my arm, I don't know how dark I can get on this podcast, but I actually struggled with my mental health in my teenage years, and I tried to um, take some drastic action
Yeah.
against myself, and that was the spot in which I did it. And so putting it there was sort of a method of reclamation and of kind of like a declaration of what I want my life to look like and these things that I feel I'm not getting. And what I kind of came to at that point, I got this when I was, I think, 21 years old. God, 5 years ago.
Oh
Woof.
my gosh.
Uh, I got that at 21 before I was about to go make a huge move out of my college and kind of into the real world. And so I wanted something that kind of like would remind me that I'm making my own life and I can give myself all these things as much as I want to. And I never really felt that growing up. It kind of put me in the stormy sea of emotionality for a very long time. And I still get there sometimes, but I've grown, I've matured, and my brain's probably just settled in a little bit more. And I know that I can write whatever I want to write, both in my creativity and in my actual real life. And yeah, that's what that tattoo is symbolic of. Of course, I'm very deep in thought about everything. So I only have one so far. I have another one brewing in my mind that I might get in the next few years. Of course, I had to pick honestly like the worst place for it in terms of coverability, which is like below the elbow on my arm. But I,
Whoops.
I don't really. I'm glad because no shame and no shade. I know some
Yes.
people, I knew another dancer who got like a fully colored illustrated Ariel and Ursula, like the Disney characters tattoos. And they were, when he was wearing less clothes on stage, they were a little bit distracting. And I'm like, well, I made this whole one myself, and it's only in black and white lining. And so when I do have a little bit of the pancake makeup, it's a very quick cover job and all these different like logistic things that honestly don't really mean much to me because it's so meaningful to me. And that's what I love about tattoos. And I love that you have that as in your podcast because no matter if it is that Ariel Ursula, I mean, listen to me like digging on that. It meant a lot to him. You know, he loved Little Mermaid and it was a story that he really loved. And so power to him. And this is my little storytelling tattoo that I have. And most people never know it has that much behind it. They're just like, oh, little black line on your arm, like, you know.
Well,
So,
and I love that symbolism is something that a lot of us, I really enjoy symbolism. And so my first visible tattoo is highly symbolic. And I'm working on another one currently because I'm about to be traveling several places.
cool.
And I thought to myself, my friends got me kind of sort of thinking about all these little flash tattoos where you can walk into
Yeah.
a shop and you're in and out in 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting here like, okay, so I'm gonna go to New York City, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
go in a couple of weeks now. When you're listening to this, this is like beginning of April. By the time I do another recording, I'll still be almost to New York City, but not quite. But so I'm already thinking about would I actually draw one this time? Would I design one? If it's only an inch by inch, right? Like it's tiny.
Yeah.
I have some ideas, but I haven't found anything that has screamed at me yet. So it's like it's kind
Yeah.
of funny, like when you're picking a tattoo, it's a very hard, thoughtful process for me.
Yeah.
I know that when I mentioned this to Brooke, she says, I need a year minimum. And I was like, well, I don't got that much time. And I was like, I've got 3 weeks. I got to figure this out. And
Can't do a year. How about 3 weeks?
and so now I'm working on Dublin. Okay, so I'm contacting these places in Dublin, Ireland. I'm working on what am I gonna do in Dublin? Well, I want to do a Celtic knot. Well, what does that look like? There's 50,000 of those too. So and while we're over there in Manchester in the UK and in Ireland,
Yeah.
I'm looking at all these little flash tattoos that I want to do. And it's
Yeah.
just really funny how much harder it is to think about these tiny ones versus this giant one I designed literally on the way to
Right.
the tattoo parlor.
Right. Yeah.
So, I have it in my head that I want to do a sun of some sort in New York City. I
Mm.
just don't know what it looks like yet. There's so many
Sure.
varieties of the sun that I've seen and celestial bodies that I'm like, I don't even know what to do right now. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm closer. I'm closer, and then I kind of wanted to infuse the compass with the sun, which
I
is
love
so
that.
funny. You know what's so funny is the fact that we're a week away from this big solar eclipse that everybody's talking about,
Yeah.
and that the fact that I wanted to do a sun was like really funny. Um,
You're like, I swear it's not just me
I
hopping on the trend,
swear
guys.
I
I thought
didn't
this
do
for a long
this
time.
for the solar eclipse, but
That that's that I call it the not the shadow side, but you know what I mean, like my little like well, I had mine like I have that tendency a lot. It really fuels me creatively, but it can also kind of be a little bit like I thought of it first, you know, like
yeah, I
ask
I I
anyone
was
else.
gonna do this before I found out about the eclipse. Yeah. I
Exactly,
was gonna do it a
exactly.
leap year. It's leap year. We were getting ideas while we were all in Mexico trying to do those last minute tattoos or whatever. The tattoo shop was not open, so we didn't get to go.
Oh
But
my goodness.
she had the same idea I did. I was thinking sun, and she was thinking sun, and I was like, "Well, what a
Mhm.
bummer that we can't get the sun while we're in Mexico." We could get the
Oh yeah, I
physical
mean,
sun, but not the tattoo sun.
perfect.
But
Hmm.
anyway, as we are wrapping up to our episode, it has gone by so quickly, y'all. We have had some
Yeah.
fun. We've had some laughs. We've had some insights. Alex, what else can we leave people with today as we close out this episode on just, live your life, be creative, use the methods that work for you, and doggone it, if you feel like getting a tattoo, don't wait any longer.
I think the one thing I'll say that I really got from today from talking to you, and I really appreciate you having me on, thank you so much, is what I love to do is big or small scale, always take a step going forwards.
Yeah.
My little retime, like reframing face tracking reel thing, I wanted to learn that skill. I didn't make it a big deal. It was a big deal for me, but I was like, oh, it was an hour of work and then just crank it out and post immediately.
Yep.
That was a step forward. Every film I've ever made, I've always stepped forward a little bit, adding more production design, having different dancers, having a new composition of music. And my hope is that when I look back in another 2 years, all these skills that I've developed will be able to come in clutch and you keep on stepping forward, big or small. That's what I want to say to people.
Awesome. Just in time as we are ending the episode. I will see you on the next episode. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jen.
everyone.
Bye.